Hello, bonjour à tous. Thank you for joining us for today's Tourism Town Hall. Before we start, just a reminder that we will have time at the end of this session for some Q&As. If you have questions that you've not already sent us in advance, please submit them through the Q&A interface, which you can access at the bottom of your screen. We will pick them up during the course of the presentations. Now I'd like to introduce our moderator, Bonnie Ruddick, Executive Director of RTO9.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad to be your moderator for today's Tourism Town Hall. My name is Bonnie Ruddick, and I'm fortunate to be joining you today from Gananoque in the beautiful Thousand Islands. Today's session will be recorded and made available on the TIAC website. This Tourism Town Hall is an event partnership between the Tourism Industry Association of Canada, Destination Canada, and our host partner, TIO, and will provide an opportunity to engage small and medium-sized business owner-operators in our province to share information, to discuss policy work and available COVID-19 relief and recovery resources. Town halls allow owner-operators to provide first-hand input on issues they are facing and hear from the leading tourism organization on the efforts being made to support tourism in Ontario and across Canada. We are pleased that our national partners at TIAC and Destination Canada are here today, and thank the Tourism Industry Association of Ontario, Indigenous Tourism Ontario, and OTEC for joining us. I'd like to extend a special thank you to you, our audience, for spending time with us today in today's session and for submitting your questions in advance for this group. As mentioned, you can also submit questions during the session via the Q&A, and depending on time, we will try to get in as many as we can. Today, we will start the session by asking Beth Potter, President and CEO of TIO, to say a few words. Following Beth, we will have a greeting from Charlotte Bell, President and CEO of the Tourism Industry Association of Canada. We will then hear from Kevin Ishkikan, President and CEO, Indigenous Tourism Ontario, and Adam Morrison, President and CEO, OTEC. After these greetings, we will have a short presentation from Dave Robinson, Interim President and CEO of Destination Canada. And finally, after David's presentation, Charlotte, Beth, David, Kevin, and Adam will be available to answer questions in our town hall session. Now I'll hand things over to Beth Potter, President and CEO of TIO.
Thank you, Bonnie. So today I wanted to give a few short remarks, but before I do, I believe we are showing a video. Yes, so we'd just like to show a short video from the local MPP, but also Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, Steve Clark. So if we could run that video.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to speak at your virtual town hall today. It's a great way to come together as a sector and a community during this challenging time. We've seen how important it is to work together to stop the spread of COVID-19 and to protect the health and safety of Ontarians. And at the same time, we are preparing for a responsible restart to our economy. Earlier this month, our government announced the first phase of our framework for reopening businesses, services, and public spaces. Our tourism industry brings us together and helps make our communities vibrant and distinct. You're also at the heart of our local economy in ridings like mine, where retail, food service, and accommodation industry sustains more than 9,200 jobs. Now more than ever, it is vital to support your billion-dollar industry and the 1.8 million Canadian jobs that depend on your members. I want to assure you that our government has your back, and we know how critical it is for the support you need as you lead Ontario's economic recovery. You have a true champion in our Minister, Lisa MacLeod. She has her finger on the pulse of your sector and what it will take to get through these challenging times together. And as a fellow minister whose riding includes the world-famous Thousand Islands and the Rideau Canal, you have my commitment to be a strong voice for the tourism sector. We're also working closely with municipalities and the federal government to monitor the impacts of COVID-19 for our communities and are continuously looking at ways to help address these challenges. In my ministry, we are continuing to work diligently to increase the supply of housing through our Housing Supply Action Plan, which will help provide more affordable options for the tourism workforce. That's something I know is an issue in tourism communities like Gananoque in my riding, for instance. Thank you to TIAC and TIO for the important work that you're doing, and to all the businesses here today for what you are doing to bring our economy and Ontario back together. Thank you, and please enjoy the rest of your town hall.
So I'd now like to just take you through a little bit of an update from TIO's perspective, and then I'll pass the baton on to Charlotte. So TIO is the authoritative voice of the tourism industry in Ontario, the voice of over 200,000 businesses and 400,000 jobs. Prior to COVID-19, our policy and advocacy work focused on ensuring that the political and economic and regulatory environment allowed for the continued exponential growth of tourism in Ontario. Since COVID-19, our work shifted to working to make sure as many tourism businesses as possible remain economically viable so that we can reopen when it's safe to do so and continue to drive the economy and grow jobs in every region of the province. Since the state of emergency in Ontario was declared, we have focused on 3 areas: dedicated and transparent engagement with our members and stakeholders. We are engaging all aspects of the industry and facilitating candid conversations with government about what needs to be rolled to save the industry from further devastation. Weekly stakeholder conference calls with up to 1,000 participants. We've completed 5 comprehensive industry surveys helping to track key indicators and to evaluate government support packages. And TIO has sat on a number of Minister MacLeod's advisory committees. Our policy push in the next 3 main stages include, if we can change the slide, please. Asking for what the industry needed immediately: commercial rent relief, no interest loans, direct financial aid, grants for capital expenditures, wage subsidies, and so on. I will say that while not all of the help that came out immediately was perfect, we are pleased to see that there have been amendments to these programs made as we go along and identify the gaps where some businesses don't fit. When that was rolled out, we shifted into pushing greater eligibility. Our focus was on, does the government aid work for seasonal tourism operators, owner-operators with no payroll, tourism operators in Northern Ontario, and those on Crown land or on reserves and smaller operations. We then shifted our focus into pushing for greater eligibility for all parts of the Ontario tourism industry, and we have seen shifts as a result. With the expanded eligibility for the $40,000 government-backed loan, changes to the wage subsidy and for seasonal businesses, and we continue to push for more. Next slide, please. While we are still very much in the midst of the crisis phase, we have also balanced our attention and efforts and are looking at what is coming next for our industry. So we are working to make sure that Ontario is in line with global best practices for safely reopening businesses, and that means working with the World Travel and Tourism Council as the only Canadian member and communicating the new procedures to the provincial government so we can inform the policy and legislative rollouts. We are working with the Ministry of Health to ensure that there is transparent and simple processes for tourism businesses to be able to confirm with government that they are meeting protocols and guidelines to reopen. And we are focused on the future of work and have pivoted our partnerships with OTEC and the Tourism Skills Net Ontario, and now also with Future Skills, the Future Skills Centre, so that we can engage our workforce during massive layoffs and put plans in place for reskilling and bringing workers back on as we enter into the future of work after a global disruption to one of the largest and most interactive industries. So thank you for taking a few minutes to listen to my update. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Charlotte Bell.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you, Bonnie. I'm really happy to be here with you today to discuss TIAC's initiatives and provide a recap of the work that we're doing on behalf of Canada's tourism sector. But before I begin, we have a special video from the Minister of Economic Development and Official Languages, the Honorable Mélanie Joly. So if we could roll the video first, that would be great.
Bonjour tout le monde. Hi everybody. We know the tourism sector is really hard hit by the pandemic and the economic crisis. On le sait, le secteur touristique est vraiment très affecté par la pandémie et la crise économique. Et c'est exactement pourquoi on est là pour vous. We're there to help you because we heard from you that you needed support to pay your employees, pay rent, and have access to liquidities. That's why we came up with a wage subsidy until the end of August, a rent relief program, and also some liquidity through the CEBA account, a $40,000 loan. If you're still falling through the cracks, please come and see us through the regional development agencies, from ACOA in Atlantic Canada to Western Diversification in the West. Donc, si vous avez besoin d'aide et vous tombez encore entre les mailles du filet, venez nous voir via les agences de développement économique régional de l'APK dans l'Est jusqu'à DEC au Québec. Keep it up, guys. Merci.
Great. All right, thank you. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I want to welcome you to our town hall. I know this is Tourism Week, and it's usually a time when we come together as an industry to celebrate our accomplishments over the last year and to bring in the high season, which is the summer season. I know things are very different this year, but I do want you to know that TIAC has been with you every step of the way, and we are continuing to advocate on your behalf, and we will continue to do this until we get through this together. We've also been starting to turn our attention towards recovery, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit. Next slide, please. So I know that some stakeholders on this call may not be familiar with TIAC, so I thought it would be important to show you what our vision is and our mission. And essentially, our mission is to be the voice for Canada's tourism industry to improve its global competitiveness as an international destination through leadership and advocacy. And of course, our vision really is to lead the Canadian industry to be the most competitive in the world. Next slide. Now, in normal times, of course, we're focused on other types of advocacy efforts to change visa or streamline visa processes, get more money for Destination Canada. There's a whole slew of things that we do, improve our competitiveness. But of course, we've been very focused on the pandemic and working with the industry to try to get certain measures in place to help you and to support you. So we've been consulting with the industry through surveys, calls, and communications to gauge your needs so we can share that information with decision makers in Ottawa, much the same as TIO has been doing in other organizations. We're also communicating with government officials on a daily basis to share important data on impacts on the industry and stress the need for immediate and longer-term relief and support. We've asked for all of the support measures that are already in place, but we know that there are gaps, and we're continually going back and stressing the importance of filling those gaps, like extending the wage subsidy, making change to the CEBA loan program so more businesses can access those funds. And we're also working on the newly created $1 billion fund managed through the regional development agencies. And I want to stress, we do know these were short-term measures for the most part. They were meant to be stopgaps. We are working on the next steps. So next slide. So we've listed here some of the programs that are already in place, but it's certainly not an exhaustive list. And as you can see, you know, there's the new program, the Regional Development Agency support. I guess the point I would make here is if you are trying to access any of these funds and you're not getting through or you're not being accepted, you need to let us know that information, because we go to government and the first thing they say is, do you have any data to show what's happening? And when we do that, we had an issue with the DMOs, for example, who somehow were getting turned away through a lot of the regional development agencies. And we quickly ran in and said, you need to do something about this. There's something going on here and it's not right. So even our minister's office contacted a number of those organizations individually. So we're still working on getting that program fixed. The emergency wage subsidy, again, we advocated for that. We advocated to change the rules so that seasonal workers would finally get access to this. And of course, we advocated to have it extended. And we continue to say this is a support mechanism that should be extended well into 2021. So we're continuing to do work on that. Next slide, please. And of course, as we all are, we're planning for recovery and we're turning our attention towards recovery. So we're partnering with a number of organizations, including our provincial partners and Destination Canada, to monitor trends. But we also, TIAC established an industry leaders committee representing many subsectors of the industry to make recommendations to government to support recovery. So we're going to be releasing that and launching this this campaign, for lack of a better term, sometime next week. And I'm just going to give you a bit of a highlight and a glimpse, but you know, it's going to, the recommendations are going to be divided in 5 core themes, and a couple of those themes are championing safety. I think this is going to be extremely important to have coordinated efforts for developing a climate of public safety, including investments in processes and infrastructure to keep Canadians and guests safe, and a harmonized approach at the federal level with provincial governments reopening. I think that is going to be key for recovery. We also know that the biggest challenge for you right now is liquidity. And so liquidity and sustaining liquidity is a huge part of our ask here for a recovery program. So changes to the BCAP program, for example, to ensure liquidity, exchanging or extending the wage subsidy into next year, extending development grants for Indigenous businesses, reprieves on air transportation security, air navigation fees, permanently eliminating airport rents, and waiving commercial rents through all Crown corporations. That's just a few of the things that we are asking for. And we've made a number of other recommendations to help entice Canadians to explore Canada through either tax credits, subsidies, investments to support destination marketing organization, reinstating the GST rebate, assistance programs for canceled fairs and festivals, as well as funding for meetings and conventions. Next slide. Thanks. So I'm just going to leave you with one message. Please stay informed. Please communicate with us. Whether you're a member of TIAC or you're not, we still want to hear from you. We've been able to help a number of people, even individually, who've run into issues, and they reach out to us, and we're doing everything that we can. I can't promise we're going to fix all the problems, but we are there to help. And if you're not already registered for our daily newsletter, please do so, because we're providing a number of information pieces there, including our ongoing advocacy efforts, government announcements, including updates for support programs, provincial and territorial COVID reopening plans. And also we're sharing good news stories, because we know that even though this is a horrible time for the industry, there are so many of you out there who are doing amazing things in your communities to support them. And if we don't have a lot to celebrate right now, we do want to make sure that we are highlighting those moments. So again, go and follow us on our social media, go to our website, and I would encourage all of you to participate in surveys. We know it's a time commitment for you, but it's really important, and I know Beth would tell you the same thing. Data is absolutely king in these days when we're trying to make a case for more support. So thank you, and I look forward to your questions later. Thanks. So finally, I would like to thank our partners at TIAC, Destination Canada, Indigenous Tourism Ontario, and OTEC for joining us today, and our Town Hall Series sponsors, of course, Meetings Mean Business Canada, Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada, WestJet, and Air Canada. So here's a brief video from one of our sponsors, Meetings Mean Business Canada.
Hello everyone, and happy virtual Tourism Week. As much as this is not how we all wanted to gather to celebrate the visitor economy, I hope that first and foremost, you and yours are healthy and staying well. I truly wish that we could be meeting in Muskoka, Niagara Falls, or by the Rideau Canal today instead of online. I'm certainly missing the amazing places that our country offers to visitors, especially this time of year. My name is Clark Gruey, and I am proud to be the 2020 chair of Meetings Mean Business Canada. These are peculiar days for all of us as we make our way through the shock of the COVID-19 crisis. The business events segment has been shut down entirely for the past 2 months as our leaders in health and government struggle to find the right balance between safety and the economy. Ensuring that Canada is once again a beacon of safety and freedom while welcoming the world back to our country is a delicate and important balance. Meetings Mean Business Canada, in partnership with TIAC, have focused our advocacy efforts in the past months toward providing a platform for elevating the awareness of the economic and social importance of the business events to government, as well as the fact that Canadian professional standards for hosting conferences, conventions, exhibitions, and corporate meetings are truly world-class. In fact, many of our industry leaders are working hard on task forces to develop protocol recommendations for reopening the country to business events. These leaders continue to fight to inform the regulatory bodies of the measures that can be quickly put into place for an industry that can control its delegates and their interactions. This is what we do all the time. Meetings Mean Business Canada is encouraging all of our industry partners to support our efforts by communicating with their local government and helping to spread the message about supporting our efforts to reopen the meetings and events industry. That said, today, we'd like to recognize all of you and the contributions that Ontario makes to Canada's amazing visitor economy. You're the people who not only rely on this industry, but you're the people who make the industry happen. So thank you for all that you do. I want to leave you with a video that may seem nostalgic now. This was developed last year to elevate awareness on how business events drive the economic well-being of Canada. Now it reminds us of the importance of bringing these events back to our country so that they may once again stimulate the economy, create jobs, and engineer opportunities for Canadian businesses, Canadians, and our visitors. Happy Tourism Week, everyone.
I think when we're making big policy decisions in our country, it's really important that we are mindful of how big of a role the meetings and the convention industry has across our country.
At Marriott, meetings and events represent over 40% of our business.
Meetings and events are critical to the fabric of who we are and what we do.
Next year, we're going to host the World Aquaculture in North America Conference. Yeah, we're hoping to bring one of the largest groups ever to St. John's, Newfoundland, to bring 1,500 people to your home province, what it means for the local economy, the restaurants, the hotels, all the local craft stores, the bakeries. It's a win-win-win.
Currently, I'm probably sitting around 35 to 40% within Canadian product, and my goal is to get to 70 to 80% sourced locally.
Our business has really grown because of how chefs have embraced the Eat Local, Eat Canadian movement. There's been a huge influx in our industry in growing produce for restaurants, for events. So our business of growing vegetables is expanding every year.
A lot of people who don't even know that they're part of the tourism business or the meetings business are experiencing great economic benefits because of meetings and conferences that take place here in our city.
When these conventions come in, it allows us that opportunity to bank some money, to upgrade, to do those changes that bring more opportunity for us. I can't stress enough what difference that makes.
The meeting business is very, very crucial to our industry. When we first opened our first business, we had like 12 employees, and now we have in excess of 200.
Thank you, Beth and Charlotte, for starting us off today. And I'd like to agree that signing up for the TIAC and the TIO newsletters would be a great option for everyone. So I encourage you to do that today. Next, I'd like to ask Kevin Eshkakan, President and CEO of Indigenous Tourism Ontario, to provide a short greeting.
Ani bojo gigido nene dejnakas nedonising donjabo dinoje dodem. My name's Kevin Ishkaki. Bonnie, thank you for the introduction. I know Bonnie tried really hard at my last name. She was practicing last night. We'll keep working on it. I really appreciate the effort and the attempt, Bonnie. It goes a long way. So just quickly want to tell everyone a little bit about Indigenous Tourism Ontario so we can get to the highlight of this, which is the question and answer period. We're the first and only Indigenous tourism organization and voice of Indigenous tourism in Ontario. It's a privilege to do this work on behalf of the industry, and I wanted to share a little bit about that work with you now. So we've done a lot of work. We're new in a way, but we're also old in a lot of ways. And thankfully for some fantastic work with Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada, one of our national partners, they came up with this economic impact report that shows that the nationwide industry contributes about $1.7 billion to the economy, about 1,900 businesses, and about 40,000 jobs. This report was updated exactly about a year ago, just over a year ago. So I'm going to break that down into Ontario because we're talking about Ontario here today. So in Ontario, what that translates to, and you've seen it on the previous slide in comparison to other provinces and territories, we contribute about $622 million in direct revenues to the Ontario and Canadian economy, just under 13,000 jobs, and just under 600 businesses. Now, the work we've been doing, and I know everyone on this webinar has been doing the same types of work, you're assessing your impacts and where different. So as the voice, this is what we came up with based on some very valid and supportable data provided by AITC at the national level back in mid-March. We anticipated back then that there'd be a loss of about $330 million in direct revenues with Indigenous tourism businesses. We estimated about 4,000 jobs being lost and 140 or so businesses that would close. Now, with that being said, on the closures, I wanted to mention this. Indigenous people are very resilient people. Indigenous tourism businesses are very resilient businesses. And when you combine those two groups, just like most of the people on this call, although we may be closing temporarily, some of it may be permanently, one of the things that cannot be taken away from any of us, and especially this group on the call as well, is our entrepreneurial spirit. And we're going to be back. We're going to be back in different ways. And we believe that's true with the Indigenous tourism sector as well. So moving on, we updated that information that we originally projected. We updated in April 27th, and this is what we came up with. This was based on information provided by AITC as well as a Destination Canada report. So we were pretty close a month and a half earlier when we projected the first two columns, about $330 million in direct revenues lost, approximately 4,000 jobs, lost in Ontario in the Indigenous tourism sector. Last but not least, a slight change about another 100 businesses that we were expecting to close either temporarily or permanently. So this is the sad side of the industry, but moving forward, we've started to put our forward-thinking hats on and came up with an approach to help us move forward within the whole industry, starting with what we're calling the protection phase. Within that phase, we've engaged business support brokers to help the Indigenous tourism operators survive through this and navigate all those programs that Charlotte mentioned earlier. Our business support brokers have been working with our businesses to make sure that they can apply to those, that they're looking into every possible angle that's there. And although we appreciate the help, it's still seemingly not enough. So that's phase one. We're still in phase one. There's no set timelines on these. the economy and the health factors are going to definitely dictate to us when we can start to move into other things. But we are starting, and we're planting seeds now for what we're calling phase 2, the restart phase, and phase 3, the recover phase. And with that, we're starting our restart phase includes some new product, including a new virtual product, new virtual reality product, and new in-person product offerings when we're ready to deliver those in a safe manner for Indigenous people and consumers. And then last but not least is the recover phase, whenever we have a new normal that we can actually operate with minimal restrictions. We're hoping to implement a new model that we're working on for the Indigenous tourism sector to help them thrive moving beyond COVID-19 and this global pandemic. So before we move on too quickly, I want to share one quick little video with you that is going to exemplify and kickstart some of our new virtual programming or support we're providing to virtual program offerings. And it's regarding the Indigenous, the Summer Solstice Indigenous Festival that runs from June 1st to June 21st. So I'm going to jump into that and show that to you and hand it back to Bonnie here. It looks like there is there we go.
Summer Solstice Indigenous Festival Virtual Edition. Featuring interactive cooking demonstrations, live and streaming concerts showcasing some of Canada's best Indigenous talent. Plus a virtual marketplace, online arts and crafts demonstrations, social distancing powwow, and much more. Summer Solstice Indigenous Festival Virtual Edition. June 1st to 21st. Full schedule and details at summersolsticefestivals.ca.
Let me watch.
Thank you, Kevin. Now I'd like to ask Adam Morrison, President and CEO of OTEC, to provide a short greeting.
Thanks very much, Bonnie. So OTEC was formed in 1991 by a coalition that included the province of Ontario, industry associations, and the academic sector to lead on workforce development and skills development strategy and implementation in Ontario. Since that time, we have been working on a long list of projects and partnerships that include the high schools, the colleges, community sector, and industry direct, through everything from corporate training to research and strategy and program development projects. As we have seen the labor and skill shortages intensify over that period of time, and as we've scaled our efforts, that portfolio became very complicated and really a complex network of different projects and brands and partnerships, and we really felt the need for clarity. So in 2017, we worked with partners like Tourism Industry Association of Ontario, and Ontario Restaurant, Hotel and Motel Association, and regional tourism organizations, including Bonnie in Southeastern Ontario, and numerous others, to begin putting together an alliance called Tourism Skills Net Ontario. So it's a provincial framework, a council, regional working groups in many destinations across the province with a broad representation. So it's a role and function model. We look for the specific stakeholders and the specific assets that they bring to the table. We document them and we collaborate on local labor market plans and skills development planning under a provincial framework and communications and evaluation strategy. So key hallmarks of the model: cross-promotion, best practice sharing, leveraging HR technology collectively to give economies of scale to small and mid-sized businesses, and really starting to look at the workplace as the third pillar of the education system, because we know that that's where the future lies. We couldn't have known how important that work would be. Since February of this year, we've seen tourism employment decrease by 881,000 jobs, which is astounding. We've been the fastest hit and the hardest hit across the economy. 43.3% of our workforce is not currently working. The unemployment rate across the sector is now 28.8%, and there are concentrations in certain segments of the industry, but the aggregate numbers don't entirely tell the story, because there's some communities and destinations where tourism is a lifeline for people's livelihoods, and one of their only avenues for local economic development and well-being. So it's a serious challenge, and we're working with partners across the province and with our national partners as well to communicate this issue in a big way. So we're excited to recently announce a partnership with Canada's Future Skills Centre, which is a national institute that was launched to research and convene best practices on skills development, innovation, and the future of work. And the new project will leverage the Tourism Skills Net framework to better understand the needs that we're facing. We have big numbers right now, but we need to better understand what they mean at the local level, what they mean for different segments of the industry, and also to accelerate targeted responses. We have resources and funding across our networks, whether they be provincial or national, but we need to really target where they're going to have the greatest impact, both in the early stages and as we actually start plotting stages of recovery. The partners in this project include the Future Skills Centre, of course, who was able to move very, very quickly to make this project a reality. And it's actually forming the first pilot of a series of initiatives that they are deeming a shock-proofing of the Canadian economy to future disruption. Unfortunately for us, we are the poster sector for disruption at the moment, and but as such, we are receiving the first support in some of the mitigation strategies. So partners include the Future Skills Centre. They also include Magnet, Ryerson, the Conference Board of Canada, Blueprint ADE, Tourism Industry Association of Ontario, Ontario Restaurant, Hotel and Motel Association, Hospitality Workers Training Centre here in Toronto, Tourism HR Canada, and the entire network of Tourism Skills Net Ontario Alliance members, which has been scheduled to expand to 20 cities this year, 2020, and further in subsequent years. The project will launch first in Ontario and will scale nationally, and we'll work closely with national partners like Tourism HR Canada to do so, and share resources and outcomes on demand as we engage the other provinces and national partners. So the stages of the project, really we have to understand what's going on. We just have big numbers right now. And so stage one is to launch a fairly intensive campaign to reach the displaced workforce, to reach people in their homes and their communities that are not working right now, and understand what these impacts mean in real terms to families, to health and wellness, to mental health, and even to transitions that might be underway. We will invite a panel from that registry to participate in skills profiling so that we can prioritize where we do make the investments in early and mid and late stages of the recovery plan. We will access this conduit to the workforce to also communicate some of the earliest opportunities for re-employment, reskilling and upskilling. And so we'll have a direct line to these individuals and be able to refer them to local hiring programs across Ontario through Tourism Skills in Ontario and in other provinces, because we know these action centers and response plans are emerging across the country right now. The next stage of the plan is to look at the employment workforce development space itself. They're partners of ours. They've historically been a recruitment sales force for us in helping to train and refer candidates to our sector. But right now, they're working with hundreds of thousands of unemployed people and struggling to provide support. So we're launching a virtual collaboration and service platform that will provide access to them and enable them to provide coaching and upskilling, reskilling in remote environments, and link them in that remote platform to employers as they begin rehiring. We're also going to be looking towards the later stages of recovery and accelerated destination-based recovery plans, initially through the SkillsNet model, but with some additional technology deployed to help networks to coordinate, share best practices, and really to operate as effectively as they can and leverage the type of data that we're gathering through all of these initiatives in real time to help plan their recovery strategies. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Adam. It's good to have you with us here today, and I look forward to continuing our work with OTEC in the future. Next, I'd like to introduce Dave Robinson, Interim President and CEO of Destination Canada. Dave is going to give us a presentation on Destination's work during this crisis.
Thank you very much, and hopefully I've got control of the presentation. And I do, thank you. So thank you very much for hosting this, and to RTO9, and I'm sorry that we can't be doing this in person, but I commit that this summer I'll be taking a trip to Kingston and Prince Edward County, so you can count on that. And I also want to thank Beth, Charlotte, Kevin, and Adam for their excellent presentations. So thank you all for being with us today. Of course, so thank you. Oops. So, you know, as Canada's national tourism marketing organization, our mandate typically has been to promote Canada internationally, focusing on international markets and bringing high-value customers to Canada. Of course, that's all now different. But some of our work hasn't changed, and that includes an awful lot of research work that we've been doing. And our mandate for sort of vibrant visitor economy hasn't changed, but it does require us to do some new thinking and leading us in a new direction. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our thinking and the work that we've been doing with our partners and what I think it means for the visitor economy. And then just maybe a word to say that I'll be presenting in English today, but a fully bilingual copy of this presentation will be available afterwards. So I'm having, thank you. Maybe I'm going to get you, Julie, if you don't mind, just advance, but I'm not seeing to be doing it probably. So I'm going to start with the challenges we're facing. So the next slide, please. Well, as everyone knows, we are definitely in uncharted territory. Navigating our way through the first global pandemic that's ever occurred in the age of the smartphone and connectivity. Next slide, please. So what do you do when you're in uncharted territory? Well, you work really quickly to try and find a map. And so what you see here on the screen is what we've done in leveraged insights to map out what we think an eventual recovery could look like. Our research team at Destination Canada has taken data from a number of sources to develop this map. It's now being adopted by others. It's an assumed approach based on other countries' experiences and the order in which public health restrictions are imposed, how they may be lifted. I need you to know, though, even though this map looks like it's very linear, a local return to normal to international travel.
David, could I interrupt you for just a second? You're really breaking up. Could you try muting and unmuting your mic, and we'll see if that helps.
I'm very sorry.
I think that's better. Go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, my apologies. Can you hear me now?
Yes, much better. Thank you.
Very sorry about that. I was saying we know this will not be a linear process. We know that conditions with the virus may change. We know that there may be surges in the virus and we'll have to dial back our expectations in some regions. So think of it more like a radio dial that will turn up and down as health conditions permit. what I think is really important is, and for all of us, is maybe the opportunity of motivating people to take those small trips of 1 to 2 hours, or even regional trips of 1 to 5 hours, when it's safe to do so. All of this is always guided by the advice that we're going to have from our provincial and national health authorities. But I just want to show you why I think this is important. The next slide, please. Again, this may be hard for people to see fully, but what this is the size of the domestic marketplace for Canada. And what we've done here is we've broken it up into sections. How much value there is in the hyper-local 1 to 2 hour drive market, how much value there is in the regional market of 1 to 5 hours, and it's quite significant. As much as $13 billion across the country in a 1 to 2 hour drive area, or as much as almost $20 billion for trips of up to 5 hours. And of course, the other pieces are important too, but our focus right away out of the gate is the hyperlocal and regional travel. Down to the next slide, please. And again, another map that's hard to read, but these are communities across Canada where up to 20% of their local economy is the visitor economy. And the blue bubbles that you see are that 1 to 2 hour drive window that I'm looking at. Now, while there are some communities that, it's not easy to get to in 1 to 2 hours and special measures will have to be taken for them, there are many across the country, as many as 800 within a 1 to 2 hour drive. Next slide, please.
David, you're still a little glitchy, so I'm not sure what you did, but maybe just give it another try. And then we might just have to move on to the town hall, and we'll post your presentation up for everyone to see later.
Well, that's very unfortunate. I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's better. So whatever you're doing now, just please continue.
All right. The other piece of research that we've done, and I think it's very important to be aware of, is community sentiment. So we've done some work with the polling from Leger, asking Canadians questions about how they feel about visitation. And the questions that you see are up on the screen. Would you welcome visitors from other communities near you, other parts of the province, Canada, the United States, and other countries? Can I have the next slide, please? How's the sound, Bonnie?
It's better, but not 100% clear yet.
Okay. Let me know what you're prepared to put up with. This slide shows you national sentiment from our first wave of research. And I'll just tell you that all of this research is available on our destinationcanada.com website, and breaks out province by province, and even the divide between rural and urban. But here you see different sentiment across the country. Atlantic provinces, most receptive to the idea of local travel. Ontario, Quebec, and British Columbia, a little bit more moderate in sentiment. The province that's the most welcoming is Alberta, including the idea, although at a very low level, of welcoming international and American visitors again. Can I have the next slide, please? And again, this is an example from Ontario. There's a moderate receptivity to local travel. I'm sorry. Moderate receptivity to local travel, and people are very much opposed at the present time to visitors from out of the country, from the United States. So of course, this is something that as a marketing organization, we need to pay attention to and help to mitigate in the work that we do going forward. This part of the work that we're also doing is we're looking at real-time signals from consumers internationally and also domestically, using our partnership with Google and confidential data from Expedia that we will be posting on our website this week that tells you about consumer attitude and when people are starting to look at traveling and searching for travel and the type of travel they want to do. So please look for that on our website. Now our challenge is going to be responding to public attitude and consumer signals, and working very closely and collaborating with our partners in the DMOs and PMOs, and working on a campaign that is flexible and dealing with issues of asymmetry and changes in the virus, and always is again grounded in health and safety. So just a high-level overview of how we think we can do this domestically. This is our thinking. Of course, this is a different kind of role for us, in that up to just 10 weeks ago, we were an international marketer. We're changing our focus to domestic marketing because we know this is where the restart has to occur. So we want to make sure that communities welcome visitors. Visitors know what they can experience. Visitors spend money with local businesses when it's safe to do so, and people know health and safety guidelines. And we're doing this in Team Canada approach. Many people will know that in 2016 we started working in a very determined way to align ourselves better with provinces and cities, and that relationship is really paying off now, I'm pleased to say. So as I said, very different for us. We're going to have a program that has the following structure. We're going to start with local execution. We're going to be hearing the voices of communities and partnering with provinces for DC funding to get to communities to fund local campaign activity. And then, of course, this will ramp up to a sort of a when national travel conditions will allow a more traditional partnership with provinces to promote domestic travel, and then at some point in the future return to our orientation promoting international arrivals to Canada, which of course is some time off. So some guiding principles already agreed to in early conversations with our partners is matching funds from provinces and territories. Work will be paused if required based on local conditions. We're securing rights for content that's going to be created that will eventually be able to repurpose in national, maybe even international campaigns, that our programming is aligned with our provincial partners, and we're building up and using our Glowing Hearts brand, which we think will have special relevance during this time. And I think we're really lucky that the brand work was done pre-COVID, but I think it really speaks to what we want to talk about. We went from a value proposition to a values proposition, and really focusing on engaging visitors by putting Canadian values front and center. This has gone from our former brand of Keep Exploring to something that is more empowering, inspiring, and transformational, and talking about communities and people. So just to be clear, we do not want to overtake in any way, shape, or form local messaging. We actually want to bring it to the forefront. We're going to be seeking stories that speak to the distinct nature of local communities, people, and places. And we're hoping to work with all DMOs and provinces to create content that will springboard to a future national DC campaign. So we're going to come out of this side braver, smarter, stronger, and learning how to use technology. And I'm so sorry for the terrible sound. It's probably my poor Wi-Fi here in my house. But just a final reminder to everyone before we go to the Q&A, we are working really hard to put information into the hands of business so that they can use it. Please visit our website, destination.com, and please sign up for DC News. We will update you every week with new information as we get it to keep you up to date with our thinking. And Bonnie, back to you. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, David, for sharing with us today. And it was unfortunate that your audio wasn't working extremely well, but great presentation. So as I mentioned at the start of the session, this town hall was developed for you to ask questions directly to industry leaders on issues affecting your business and the tourism industry. Many of you submitted your questions in advance, and please continue to submit your questions through the Q&A. I'll ask that the panel please keep your responses short and to the point so that we can get through as many questions as possible, and I'll do my best to direct them to the most appropriate person. To start the conversation, let's begin with some of the questions that were submitted in advance. For Charlotte at TIAC, what is TIAC doing to help the government understand the urgency and dire situation our sector is facing?
I think I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay, great. Thanks. Thank you for that question. Well, as you know, we're an advocacy organization, so we are very much focused on advocacy activities with government right now. We have a number of standing calls with very senior officials on a weekly basis. We are also speaking with the Minister's Office on a very regular basis. You know, as I mentioned earlier in my presentation, data is key. And so we are doing, much like Beth is doing in Destination Canada, I think what we're all, and OTAC and everyone else, I think we're trying to make that case and to say, look, this is the impact. This is how these support measures have been implemented, and here's what's working, and here's what's not working. Here's how to fix it. So a lot of what we're doing is really sharing information in real time, and that it's not a once a month type of thing. We're constantly having to go back and giving more examples. So that's been a very, very key focus. I've also testified in front of the Parliamentary Finance Committee. I've had calls also with a number of ministers, their staff, as well as opposition parties. So there's a very wide gamut of activities going on. But the message is always clear. It's a dire situation. More needs to be done. And now we're turning our attention to recovery, and we've got a full-blown communication strategy to deal, and advocacy strategy to deal with that.
Great, thank you, Charlotte. I couldn't agree more. The more information that you have and can pass on, the better it is.
Yeah.
So now we're going to move over to Kevin at AITO. Where do you see Indigenous tourism in the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, we're in time, before the pandemic, we were in times of the highest demand we've ever had for Indigenous tourism product. And we haven't really fully been able to meet or supply that demand properly. We had growth rates that were close to 25%. In 3 to 5 years, and once things are sorted out, we're going to be different, obviously. I think we all kind of know that. But I can see us getting back to that point where the demand for Indigenous tourism is, it's huge, where we see growth at about 25% a year. With that being said, it's going to be a critical component to helping Indigenous groups close the gap in terms of economics. I think it's going to be a huge tool for cultural and economic reconciliation. And when we do this, there'll be so much collaboration with other groups, because I see it happening right now. The collaboration in these times are unreal and off the charts. And it's fantastic for Indigenous tourism businesses, but it's going to take time to get back to some kind of normal, but it's going to be stronger than ever, is my opinion.
Great, thank you, Kevin, and I couldn't agree more. For David at Destination Canada, what resources and programs do you offer that are relevant to small business?
Well, with regret, we don't have any programs directly for small business. It's not core to our mandate, but we do have things, and we are doing things that I think are helpful for small business. I've mentioned during my presentation our big focus on research and the pivot that we've done to really double down and focus on domestic research and publishing it on our website. We're also taking steps and hosting our own webinars. We have one coming up next week where we're going to unpack a little bit about how our research can be used by small and medium-sized businesses, maybe also some tips and tricks from some of our digital masters at Destination Canada on how SMEs can improve their web presence for the return to marketing. So in areas like that, and maybe indirectly and maybe not seen by anybody, we've spent a lot of time providing high quality research back to the Government of Canada to assist them in policy development and decision making. So not really information for us, but to help inform them on the challenges that business is facing. Bonnie?
Great, thank you, David. So our next question is for Beth at TIO. There's a need for a clear sense of which ministry or provincial entity will have the authority to authorize and clear businesses to open. What work have you been involved in around the provincial realignment of power, and who do we go through for this?
Thanks for the question, Bonnie. So the answer is not necessarily straightforward. Right now, the province has enacted a state of emergency and has created what they deem to be essential businesses that can remain open or partially open, and non-essential businesses that need to remain closed. In order to, as we move forward towards reopening, as the sanction is lifted, the ultimate act of who can say you're open or you're not open comes down to the community level. So the municipalities do have an opportunity to indicate whether or not they're open or not, but in most cases we believe will follow the province. And then it comes down to your local public health authority. And they are going to be looking at things like, what are you doing to ensure that you are putting the community's needs at the forefront of reopening your business. And so that's the kind of the order of go, if you'd like to put it that way. So it's the province, the municipalities, and the local public health authority.
Great, thank you, Beth. Charlotte, did you want to make any comment about that from the federal level?
Well, I guess the comment I would make is, and one of the trickiest or most difficult things that we're dealing with is that every province is different, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of coordination in terms of what is reopening, what are the protocols, what are guidelines. And I think that as we get closer to or even more into recovery, I think it's going to be very important to have some kind of way of coordinating efforts so that, especially interprovincially, when things start to open in that way, that people have some certainty about what the conditions are, what they need to do, what the protocols are in those in other provinces and in other communities. I think one of the biggest challenges we're going to have is to rebuild consumer confidence, and I think you do that by providing certainty and perhaps putting guidelines in place that I don't want to use the word uniform, but certainly have some consistency. I look at what the hotel industry has done and what they've done, because we share a border with the U.S. Our Hotel Industry Association, the national one, partnered with the U.S. Hotel Association, and they came up with guidelines for North America. And I think that's a really smart way of doing things. And I think we may see more and more collaboration. But certainly, I think that when it becomes very granular and when there are different measures, even at the community level, I think it's going to be a little bit challenging for us to reopen and create a climate of certainty. So I think over time, we're probably going to see more communities try to follow what the provinces are doing. And I'm really hoping that the provinces start working together so that there's a little bit more uniformity there.
Great, thank you, Charlotte and Beth. Now we're going to move over to Adam at OTEC. What does the Rapid Response Project look like for workers and businesses?
So for workers, the project will represent a conduit through which we can communicate with them, essentially. It'll begin with a registry, and we'll begin communicating information on the various relief and grant programs as they become available. And then over the longer term, it's a conduit through which we'll refer them to local services and supports and programs for upskilling and reskilling. For businesses, it's a means of, in the short run, supporting those that they've been forced to lay off. And many have been doing so organically, reaching out and making sure that their teams are all right, and looking for more resources to do so. Over the longer term, it's going to provide resources and data to help them plan recovery.
Great, thank you, Adam. And now we're going to move back to Charlotte. What can industry do to help elevate TIAC government asks? How can we all help?
That's a great question, and thank you for asking it. Every time you answer one of our surveys or you answer one of Beth's surveys, you are elevating our asks. You are helping us, for all of us, I mean, everyone here. It is one of the most important things that you can do to help us help you. I know that sounds like a cliche, but it is absolutely true. And it's only through that information that we've been able to give back to government that we push and we push and we push. But it's only when we're able to give them some data and information that we're actually able to see positive results. The other thing I'm just going to mention is, as I mentioned earlier, we are going to be launching our recovery plan and campaign, and we're also going to be relaunching our tourismmatters.ca push politics tool, and we are going to invite everybody, and Beth, of course, will send all the information, and all of the other provincial associations will send information to the members. This is an opportunity for you to just go through this website where you enter your postal code, you send a letter to your MP, ask for their support, and tell them why tourism matters, why it is so important, and why they have to take action right now and help us. So that is another way that you can help us. And the other thing I would say is, beyond that, I do find it helpful when people send me an anecdote or their own story that something went wrong or something went well, so that we can share that. So again, having that information, even if it seems anecdotal, I find it helpful, and sometimes that can lead to something else. So I would say communication. So keep doing that, and you know, keep answering those surveys. And we're sorry about how often we come back to you. We know it's a bit of a it's a bit of a drag to have to do, but it's really helpful.
Great, thanks, Charlotte. Beth, did you want to add anything to that in terms of TIO efforts? Because I know you've been reaching out to partners as well, gathering some of those stories. So did you want to add to anything Charlotte said?
Well, on that one, I mean, absolutely. We've been reaching out and collecting, you know, those anecdotal stories along with the survey data, because it really helps when you can put a personal story to a number. And when we're trying to, whether it's we're speaking to government or we're leveraging the media to get our point across and to inform not only government, but also the general population about the impact that tourism has had. It's very helpful for us to have a local story and different types of examples. So whether it's, you know, resorts or an attraction, or, you know, in the north, you know, festivals and events and the importance to the community. So we're collecting, we've got quite a good collection, and we're always looking for more, especially if it's related specifically to access to any particular relief program, or the other thing that we're looking for are those great stories of the way people have become innovative and changed the way they're doing business in order to survive.
Great, thank you, Beth. We're going to now move to some of our Q&As that have come in since we started the session. So we had a question from Glenn Shackleton. Charlotte, I know you've replied, but we think it's important if maybe you share this with everyone. So Glenn's question was, the wage subsidy is entirely based off of a year-round business model. Is there a push to change that criteria to better reflect the reality for seasonal businesses?
Yes, and I did respond to him online, and it seems he was talking about something different. I was talking about the fact that with the wage subsidy now being extended into the later months for the summer, that seasonal businesses should be able to access that, because you would be able to compare your revenues and show that there has been a significant drop year over year, or compared to January and February. Those were the two tools. But I believe his question was a little bit different. I'm inviting him to contact me directly so that I can figure out what we can do to help him. But seasonal businesses should have access as the wage subsidy is being extended. But I do think he's having a specific issue with the program. So Glenn, please feel free to contact me offline, and I'm happy to talk to you.
Great, Charlotte, thank you.
All right.
And that goes for all our panelists. If you know, any of our viewers are, you know, have any other questions that they want to contact our panelists privately for, please feel free to do so. Next, we've got a question from Lisa McLean for David at Destination Canada. When will Destination Canada be launching an Explore Canada campaign to drive tourism for this summer? We are fast approaching June, and consumers are starting to inquire about options available within Canada or within their own backyard.
Lisa, thank you for the question. It's our absolute preoccupation. We're moving as fast as possible. Of course, guided by, you know, the guidance that we're getting from public health authorities in Canada and the provinces. So it is our intention, as you can tell from my presentation, to focus on that, you know, the 1-2 hour local drive market, and then the up to 5-hour drive market, and try and get people visiting restaurants, attractions in those areas. We're hoping that we have something to say in the very near days about that. It's very close. And as you also saw from my presentation, we understand that the best support for the visitor economy is revenue. So as soon as it's safe to do so, we're going to try and get you back in business.
Great, thanks, David. Yeah, it's definitely a day-by-day issue still, so we'll continue on. Next, we have a question for Adam at OTAC. How can businesses and destinations get involved with OTAC?
Well, we're preparing to launch the campaign, and as we do so, we'll be, you know, inviting people to register for information, identify where they are, and how we can specifically engage them in the network. In the meantime, as that will likely be another couple of weeks out, please contact us directly, and we'll make sure that, that you're the first to learn about the stages of the strategy. And we can even have some preliminary discussion on your specific needs and your region. We've heard from a number of provinces so far as well, stakeholders across the country, and so we're starting to map that out currently.
So Adam, do you have your communications plan that you can share with us yet for releasing that information?
That plan is not yet finalized, and but it's very close, and we will as soon as it is. And we're working with TIO and Orma and the partners in the plan to finalize and distribute it. But we do need everybody to be a part of that communication strategy.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Adam. And now we're going to move to Kevin. Do you work with non-Indigenous tourism partners? And if so, how can I get involved?
Thanks, Bonnie. Yeah, we definitely do. We partner with whoever has got common goals and common philosophies and wants to work in a mutually beneficial way. We'll work with anybody if there's some good energy there between both parties, and we're both going to benefit, and we're both growing the economy and advancing the agenda for Indigenous tourism. And when we do that, everybody benefits, not just Indigenous people. So of course, we work with everybody and anybody.
Great. Thank you, Kevin. And sorry, I'm just trying to read here. I think we have a question here for Beth. Are there any preferred planning for reopening business toolkits resources that you would recommend for A, adventure tour operators, B, restaurants, There are many of them out there. Where can we access them?
So we have been collecting those kinds of resources, and they're on our website in the COVID section. And to speak to one of the things that came up a little bit earlier about providing a seamless travel experience. I have been working very closely with the World Travel and Tourism Council. I've been sitting on their COVID task force, as well as on the working groups that are developing the global standards for the different segments of our industry. These standards have been developed taking into account input from the World Health Organization as well as the CDC, and have been signed off by a number of global brands around the world. So released so far have been a global standard for hospitality, another one for outdoor retail. Coming later this week, there will be one for airlines as well as one for airports. And then there will be one for tour operators and the convention centers, meetings, and events. So those all four should be out later this week. And we have been participating in that. And then what I've been doing is bringing that knowledge back down to the provincial level here in Ontario. And as we've worked with our sectors here in Ontario, I've been encouraging not only for the sectors to look at what the province has issued as guidelines through the Workplace Safety and Prevention Services, which is the Ministry of Labor's Health and Safety Organization, but also to line up with these global standards. Because eventually, and not too long from now, in the matter of days, WTTC is going to be launching a safe travels stamp that businesses can use to indicate to travelers that they are using protocols that line up with the global standards, and are committed to providing a seamless and safe travel experience for their guests.
Great, thank you, Beth. And again, I encourage everyone to sign up for the TIO newsletter just to keep on top of all these great things that Beth and her team are doing for us. So this is a question for Beth and Kevin. How do we instill both visitor and community confidence to get people traveling again, particularly in small towns, cottage country, Indigenous communities? Everyone, including the community and the tourists, need to feel safe. Yes, sorry.
So I'll start, and then I'll let Kevin jump in, but I do think that as businesses are assessing how they're going to reopen and welcome their guests back, that they need to be communicating that process, not only to their guests and their visitors, but to their local public health authority as well. I think that they should engage the local public health authority in their plans, and so that the public health authority can understand why they're doing what they're doing and where they're basing their plans on, so that we can again provide them confidence and continuity across not only communities but sectors across the province, and then hopefully across the country. Kevin?
Yeah, so to just add to that from an Indigenous or a First Nation perspective or an Indigenous community perspective, I'm not going to repeat what you said, Beth, but there's different jurisdictions within First Nations from the provincial and federal levels. So it's a little bit different, but it's also the same. And there is some, I think generally speaking, similar to cottage country, First Nation communities and small rural communities have a lot in common. And they have limited capacity to address health needs, let alone address visitors during peak seasons with more and more travelers coming into the region. So that's one of the challenges we face is there's increased demand for Indigenous tourism product. We're growing capacity, and in times like this where there's a global pandemic, the Indigenous Nation communities are they're very vulnerable from a health perspective. So we want to make sure we're respectful, not just respectful of Indigenous groups, but Indigenous groups being respectful of travelers coming into the area as well, who just want to enjoy the region. And there just, in my opinion, be some simple communication, and that's really up to leaders. I know I provide advice to many leaders in my region. What I would put out there to anybody on this call, if you're feeling challenged or you need an introduction to anybody within the Indigenous community, I may or may not know somebody to start that conversation, and I'm willing to introduce people as we see fit, or even help massage some of those conversations so that everybody can move forward in a productive manner. But all we need to do is simply enough be respectful of each other and understand the risks that are involved, the additional risks that is with Indigenous communities, specifically First Nations.
Great, thank you, Kevin and Beth. And we have a question from William Hogg for Destination Canada. Will Phase 1 Destination Canada funding be direct to cities, DMOs, or will it go through provincial organizations?
William, the plan that we're working on sees us partnering with provinces, them matching significant funds to be directed to communities. So our agreements will be with provinces as the work that we're doing right now. And working with provinces to focus, on some priority.
Great, thank you, David.
Thanks, Bonnie.
So now we have a question for Charlotte at TIAC, which is of interest to me as well. We have three borders in our RTO. So what is TIAC doing to help the government understand the importance of opening borders and welcoming international visitors from safe destinations?
Oh yes, this is a very difficult one, and of course, well, what I will say is yesterday, a coalition of national organizations, national associations, including the National Chamber of Commerce, we sent a letter to the Prime Minister, and we copied a number of key federal ministers, and we raised the issue. Look, it's time for us to have a really open discussion with you, a dialogue about recovery, about what needs to be done, about border reopenings, when it's safe to do so, and we need some clarity and we need some certainty, because we need to plan. We can't just flick a switch and think that everything is going to come back, just like that overnight. So we are working on this. You have to understand this is a challenging one. This is a very challenging one. At this time, with the US, of course, it's been announced that the border will be closed until June 21st, I believe. But we are continuing to work on this and to push for more information. And, if it's not going to open until the end of June, we need a plan. We need to know when things are going to start to unfold, how they will unfold, and we want to be part of that discussion. So, so that's what we're doing, and it's also going to be part of our campaign for recovery, which, again, as I said, we're going to be launching next week. So we are definitely working on this issue, but it is a tricky one, and of course, you have to understand that Health Canada has a lot to do with decisions to reopen the border because of the health and safety component there. I will say that we were successful a few months ago when Health Canada had posted a notice on its website stating that no foreign nationals could enter the country until June 30th. We had that date removed because it was causing a lot of uncertainty. So, so we haven't been able to reopen a border, but we certainly are also working behind the scenes to try to make sure that we're not doing things or communicating in a way that creates even more uncertainty and damage to the industry. But more to come on that, for sure.
I couldn't agree more in terms of the planning and the communications for our businesses. That's vital right now for understanding.
Yeah.
The costs of some of them reopening are exorbitant, and really to have that planning and communication, I think, is vital at this point. So
yeah,
we're going to move back over to Kevin for a minute. Somebody has a really good question. Can you tell us more about your Indigenous food tourism work? It sounds tasty. And at 2:30 in the afternoon, as my granddaughter would say, is it snack time? So let's talk food for a bit.
Yeah, and I'll just open this. I'm not a culinary expert by any means. It's definitely a sector within our sector that's trending and is very interesting. I'll say this, I'm not an expert on creating food or understanding all the elements that make food happen in an Indigenous way, but I do enjoy eating it. But I will share this. We are working on a couple of projects. One we already completed, which we're very, very proud of, and we worked with Northern Ontario, Destination Northern Ontario, and the Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada on it. Is we created the first regional Indigenous food tourism strategy in the world, and we're starting to implement that already. And we're also now working on one for Southern Ontario that we got some support from the Canadian Experience Fund and our RDAs in Ontario to help grow. And then we're also merging those two together to have a province-wide Indigenous food tourism strategy for Ontario. So that's a really, it's trailblazing work that we're very proud of. And I'm glad to be a part of it because I'm learning so much about Indigenous foods and cuisine and the culinary world. It's really interesting. Not to make, I'm not going to describe foods because I don't want to make anybody hungry in the mid-afternoon here. I'll say this, there's some other really cool initiatives that we're working on, and one that's I think is going to have a huge impact in that 3 to 5 year range is the Indigenous Culinary Innovation Center of Excellence project that we've started working on. It's very preliminary at this point, but you'll see something come out of that where we collaborate and partner with other groups to, create this center of excellence that involves training, giving us business models that we can replicate in other nations. So we're up here in, I'm Anishinaabe, so we're starting here in Anishinaabe Nation. We're also going to share that with other nations around Ontario and across the country. And it's groundbreaking work, but I can't share much more than that on it, other than we're doing some great work, and we're leading not just Ontario, but I would say Canada and also the world, really. And it's all being done in partnership with great partners like AITC and the Indigenous Culinary of Associated Nations. There's a lot of different people involved supporting these initiatives. So it's really exciting to be a part of it. It's after being involved in the industry for 17 years, there are still things out there that get you energized and excited. So I'm really proud to be a part of all that.
Great, Kevin. Virtual snacks. Somebody needs to figure that out for us. So we're going to move to Adam. How best to connect to OTEC to hear what your platform, when your platform is launched, how will workers and businesses hear about it? I think you already addressed that, but if you want to add to it about the communications.
So the campaign will be a communications campaign, both, and I guess it's something to stress about the framework that we work through is that it does cascade through our provincial association partners, both on the industry side, but as well on the community side. And I think there was a question in the queue about how do we engage the local employment and training networks. So that's a network that has a lot of resources and funding, and what they struggle to do is engage industry. So our approach is both to cascade through their provincial associations and coordinating bodies, as well as our own industry bodies, from the provincial to the regional and to the local level. So we'll communicate it very broadly. And then the model really has us identifying hubs. Initially, we'll be working through Tourism Skills in Ontario. We're working in 12 cities now, with plans to expand to 20 destinations by the end of this year. That'll be the primary focus. However, this situation has forced us to think about a lot more remote service delivery. So we'll be talking with communities in between those 20 destinations and looking for solutions that we can deploy remotely, or even resources that they can pick up from the portfolio to help with their own local delivery. So there is a fairly targeted strategy with room through the tools that we're developing and launching to expand much further and scale it.
Great, thank you, Adam. So we have another question for Charlotte and Beth. How is TIAC and TIA working together with industry and other tourism advocacy organizations to help lobby for much needed relief measures? So do you want to start, Beth? Charlotte? Okay.
All right.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter, I guess. Listen, we're always working closely together. TIAC and all of the provincial and territorial associations, of course, meet on a weekly basis to compare notes and talk about what we can be doing together. The other reality is, you know, I've known Beth for a long time. She sat on our board, and always comfortable to go to her and get her guidance or ideas in terms of what she's seeing in her province and how that might apply federally, and she does the same thing. So we communicate quite frequently, but there's a lot of coordination between all of the provinces and the Federal Advocacy Association. You know, normally this week, you know, we're almost forgetting it is Tourism Week. We would be on the Hill together. She could be in Ottawa right now, and we'd be going out for dinner.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Stop mentioning food.
I know. This would have been our Parliamentary Hill days, our lobby days, where Beth and many other provincial organizations would be with us, and we would be lobbying government and telling them why they need to give us more support. But we would be doing that in person, and of course now we're having to do everything virtually. But we are still very much working together and collaborating. Beth, anything you would add?
Well, I would just add that, you know, while we do work very closely together, both myself and, well, both TIO and TIAC also work with the other organizations that represent sectors of the industry. So, you know, we bring together, whether it's, you know, Restaurants Canada or the Hotel Association on, you know, or Meetings Means Business Canada, from Charlotte's point of view or from my point of view. You know, we do a lot of work with the other sector associations that you'd be familiar with in Ontario, like Resorts of Ontario, you know, ORMA, OTEC, but we also work with the Ontario BIA Association, the Economic Developers Council of Ontario, and occasionally with organizations like CFIB and the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. And, you know, what we know through all of this work and through these constant conversations that we're having with our colleagues across sectors is that our message is in line with everyone, with others, and that there is certainly a wide array of support from other organizations for the tourism industry right now. And so they've been lending their voice to our cause, so to speak, and our efforts as we've been working at both the provincial and the federal levels. Anything else, Charlotte, that you want to add?
No, I'll just miss you this evening. As it's just a different tourism week. That's,
it is. Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Well, definitely collaboration is the key, and clearly you two are a perfect example of that. So David, we have a question for you about DC's research. How can I access it? And if can I access it? Sorry, and how? But also, if you could maybe tie this in to a bit about your alignment. We've heard the alignment between TIO and TIAC. So what about your alignment with Destination Ontario?
Oh, yeah. I spoke, maybe I'll tackle the research question first and then talk about our partnership, Bonnie. For, you know, the DMOs and PMOs that we work with, we've made all of our research free this year. So that people can get access to the work that we're doing, and focus and thinking of the small and medium-sized businesses in Canada. We're making huge chunks of our research available on our destinationcanada.com website. You'll see a section on COVID-19 related research. It's got the domestic signaling work coming up that I told you about, and also the public opinion work that I mentioned to you earlier in my presentation, that you may not have heard of. We have quite a schedule of research products to come that I think will be beneficial for business as we gear up and head towards restart. I really have to tell you about the extraordinary partnership we do have with provinces, territories, and cities. And, you know, we started, as I mentioned, in 2016, our North Star partnership to find ways to work more collaboratively together, figure out ways to reduce duplication and overlap, and really do some joint planning work together. And again, I mentioned earlier on that we're doing that planning work in good times, knowing that someday a downturn might come or things may not be so good. I don't think any of us were smart enough to see the pandemic, but those solid relationships that we have with Ontario and other provinces is really paying off dividends. They're informing our planning. It mutually reinforces each other, and the plan that we have for the domestic restart has been very much informed by what we've got from the team at Destination Ontario. I hope that helps.
Great. Yes, definitely. Thank you, David. Excuse me. Adam, we have a question for you about your programs. Are they free to industry? And do you have a newsletter or something that I can sign up for to stay connected?
Absolutely. So first, most of the programming being made available through the strategy is at no cost. But the needs are so diverse that, and we're still only putting together the portfolio and doing the forecasting of what the new realities will look like. What will be the new technology requirements at the business level? What will be the new health and safety standards? So I can say with the existing plan, it will be made available to the Tourism Skills Net Alliance network, and it's significant. It doesn't scratch the surface of the total problem nationally. We're talking about 800,000 to 1 million workers laid off. We're talking about a few dollars per person with the funding that we currently have available. We need to really rally all of the training and workforce development organizations across the country to coordinate and ensure that what we do have can go as far as it possibly can. It still won't be enough, but within the scope of the plan as we're implementing it right now, the first training offerings will be free.
Great, thank you, Adam. We have a question from Gary Clark, the Vice Chair of the Canadian Biosphere Reserves, and it is for Destination Canada. There are now 18 UNESCO designated biosphere reserves in Canada, primarily in the rural regions. The biospheres were recognized as potential partners in the federal tourism strategy released last year. We are focused on supporting the sustainability of our local communities and work on programs such as staycations, local foods, trail activities, amazing places, etc. Would you be prepared to meet with us to discuss how we can collate in charting a new course?
Yes, and I'm sorry, it was Glenn who?
Gary Clark from
Gary.
Canadian Biosphere Reserve.
Gary, thank you very much for the questions. Back before COVID, I had actually met with the UNESCO people in Ottawa who were interested in trying to find ways to work with Destination Canada, and we had a good conversation, but hadn't really grown into anything more yet. But I absolutely would welcome a conversation with you. We will eventually return to a universe where we are growing the visitor economy again and can get back on pursuing the goals that were in the tourism strategy. And, we know that those goals included, moving visitors out of cities back when they were sold out into newer communities, rural and remote, and growing the shoulder season. And also thinking about way down the road, how do we grow and create new experiences for international visitors? So I would imagine the biospheres and our great national parks, who are sometimes not so well visited, would be part of that thinking. So yes, absolutely, Gary, I'd welcome that conversation and meeting.
Great. We have a question from Northern Ontario. I'll give a little shout out to David McLaughlin and say hello. Tourism recovery is likely to come in stages. Where do I find out about these stages, and how will resorts and cottage rentals be affected? So I'll open that up to any of our panel members.
Well,
Go Beth.
Yeah, I know. It's not a straightforward answer, but let me give it a go. So, and I've been in conversations with some senior folks within provincial government over the last day and a half to really try and get to the heart of the matter on this one, because it is a challenge. So right now, if you go to ontario.ca/COVID, you can find links to Ontario's framework for reopening. There are 3 stages. So there are, first of all, actually there's 4 stages. There's 3 stages to the framework, but the stage that came before the framework was the state of emergency. And that state of emergency listed all of the essential services, businesses that were allowed to remain open with all of the appropriate protocols in place to ensure safety for workers and for clients. And then as the province started to reopen about a week and a half ago, there are new businesses that have been added to that. So what you need to do is you need to find your business and discover where it is in those lists. And then you need to decide whether or not you can open based on risk. I would advise that you assess and weigh your decision in the context of risk, and that you really are informed by other educated opinions. So for instance, you should be seeking legal advice because you want to understand how opening will affect your business and the liability that you might have, as far as, are you in contravention or are you not with the state of emergency. And then the other thing you'll want to do is look at insurance, your insurance coverage, to make sure that you're covered there. And if you are going to plan to open, then, I'll go back to my point earlier about working with your local public health authority to make sure that your plans to reopen are well thought out. They are grounded in the work that is being done at the global and provincial level, and that you are being thoughtful as far as your approach. And if the public health authority can sign off, then then you should be okay. Now, I will just put the other caveat in there that municipalities still have the right to impose their own bylaws. Now, to my knowledge, there has been a lot of discussion at some municipal councils about potentially imposing, no, we don't want you to come here kind of bylaws, but I don't know that there are any municipalities right now that have lined up against the province's state of emergency. So to my knowledge, all municipalities are following the state of emergency. So that means that if you are on the non-essentials list and you should be remaining closed right now, then that's what you should be doing, and that's what the municipality will support.
Great advice. Thank you, Beth. We have a question from Laurie De Silva at RBC Place, London, for Charlotte and Beth, and we'll let Charlotte start this time, give Beth a little break. To date, there's been no funding assistance for municipalities announced. As a convention center owned by the city, we've not been able to access any federal or provincial funding support. Is there any potential new funding opportunities that either Beth or Charlotte might be aware of that a municipality-owned center could access, or general support for business meetings and conventions?
That's a really important question, and that is definitely a sector that has fallen through, a gap, essentially, with a lot of the funding supports that are out there. We have asked for, certainly as part of recovery, special funding for meetings and conventions, because we do realize that, first of all, I think they will be challenged in terms of reopening early, and also that I think a number of them have not been able to access other funds. So I will go back also and make sure that there's nothing else that I've missed at the federal level. And I don't know if Beth has any information in terms of provincial funds that might be accessible.
So I don't, but I do know that AMO, so the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, and QP have joined forces and went to the province of Ontario to ask for funding for municipalities to support them in their on their path to recovery. They have asked for some new revenue tools, and they've asked for some cost sharing arrangements for municipally operated services. So at this point, it's an ask into the province, and I haven't heard, there has been no follow-up announcement related to it.
Okay, thank you both, Beth and Charlotte. Now, John Templeton, this question is for you, Charlotte, from John Templeton. Do you have anyone on your recovery committee representing the educational, student, youth, travel industry? And when will this work be released?
Yes, and yes, we do. Andrew Lind from MLI has been part of the recovery committee since day one. I should also say that I've been also working closely with Canada Language, which of course represents a number of educational international students. Oh, I just heard a strange noise. So yes, they're absolutely part of it. They're a very important part of recovery. And as I mentioned earlier, I believe that you should be able to access the recovery package. Next week, we're going to be launching that campaign.
Great, thank you, Charlotte.
All right.
So David, somebody is wondering, what about business meetings? Are you still looking to attract conferences in 2021 and beyond?
Business events obviously is a very important segment and one of our business lines. Again, talking about the research we've done, we have some forecasting, a PACE report that we have on our website that speaks specifically to business and events. But I have to say right now, I don't know exactly what the state of planning is. I don't have that information at my fingertips. So if you don't mind, I might like to follow up on that one. I don't want to lead you astray.
Fair enough. Thank you, David. For Adam and Kevin, how do you both work with national bodies, Tourism HR Canada and AITC? Can I get national resources from your websites?
I'll start.
Adam, sure.
We've worked with Tourism HR Canada for many years. So on the national portfolio of labor market information and occupational standards and e-merit certification and training portfolio, OTAC works with industry partners here at Ontario to make sure that they're engaged in that work and that we're reflected in the national programming. Many of these resources are actually being made available, such as the e-merit online portfolio. So that is being made available at no charge to industry. We're working with Tourism HR Canada on this response strategy as well, so that we can coordinate provincial initiatives and models for access to other provinces, for instance. So that's a long-standing relationship, and we coordinate between the different portfolios and share best practices as best we can.
Great.
So to quickly add to that, from an Indigenous tourism perspective, of course, our national partner is the Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada. And the role we take as Indigenous Tourism Ontario is we take care of the provincial work. ITAC takes care of the national work. And through our provincial counterparts like OTAC and TIO, we then use those channels to connect with our national partners. In addition to the great work that ITAC's doing as well, because they have those relationships with TIAC as well. They have relationships with Tourism HR Canada. We work with our provincial partners, and ITAC works with the national partners, and we all collaborate together, which is needed for everybody's benefit.
Great, Kevin, thank you. So as we're getting close to the end of our time today, I'm just going to ask each of you to give us about a 30 or 60-second closing comments. So I'll start as I see you on my screen. So we'll start with Adam.
Great. So I was asked yesterday to compare the 2008 crisis to this one. And I think they're both economic crises, but this one is unique in the human and workplace-based nature of this disruption associated with it being a health pandemic. And so we see that that's driving a demand for recovery approaches and mechanisms that are going to be a lot more focused on skills, talent, health, safety, and sort of work. And that's based really on an understanding that if we don't get the people side of the equation right, and we don't get the people back to work in effective ways, we're not going to have the fuel for the economy to recover. So I think that's quite different. When we get over this, or we decide that we've recovered, it's going to be different, and we need to reorganize things in a way that we get people working effectively, because people are our customers.
Great, thank you, Adam. I'll go to Kevin next.
So one of the things just to close here, like you mentioned it a few times, Bonnie, and I've mentioned it a few times, and it's evident throughout everybody's discussions here, is collaboration and working together to advance the agendas for all of us is critical. And I wouldn't be, I'm really proud to say this. And I know Beth's on the call and so many of the TIO board members, but and I'm yet to be proven wrong on this point. I'm assuming here to a certain degree, but I've asked Carol Greenwood from TIO. I think I was one of the first Indigenous people on the TIO board of directors, and this morning I believe I'm the first Indigenous person on their executive committee, and that's a huge kudos to TIO.
Yay.
And it's something that we need to continue to do to help with that cultural and economic reconciliation. And we're all in this together. I know that's a cliche we're using a lot these days, but to grow the industry, Indigenous people need to be involved. And there's great ways that you can do it with each of your organizations or businesses. And it's simply about being a good neighbor to each other and working together on things collectively and collaboratively.
Great. Thank you, Kevin. And now Charlotte.
Hi there, thank you. Somebody asked, is there something positive coming out of this? And this is probably the darkest moment this industry has ever seen. What I will say is, and I'm not minimizing what the industry is going through or what we're all going through together, but what I do find is I've never seen better coordination and collaboration amongst this industry. At all levels, in terms of the federal organizations or associations collaborating closely together, although we've always worked together, but we've really all come together a lot closer than we were before, and we're continuing to work with the provinces. And I think that may be a very small silver lining that comes out of this, where we're finding new ways of working together that we hadn't thought of before, because we're also busy doing the work that we needed to do. So not that we weren't collaborating, but we are collaborating a lot closer. And I think that's a really positive thing, considering all of the very negative stuff that we're experiencing right now. And I also believe, and I agree with Kevin, it might be a cliche, but we're stronger together, and we really have to continue to work together.
Well said. Thank you, Charlotte. And now we'll move to David.
Well, guess what, Bonnie? I'm going to jump on the collaboration train to everybody else, but I'm going to give you a slightly different take on it that I think is really important. And I've talked about this before, maybe even at a tourism town hall, but I don't think we appreciate how much collaboration is Canada's secret sauce, and the fact that it's sort of in our DNA to do it as Canadians. And I can tell you, wearing, from an international viewpoint, when I take a look around at our competitors internationally, there is no jurisdiction that is as integrated and collaborative as Canada, which makes us stronger coming out the other side of this and more of a competitor internationally. So that's something we should be very proud of, and don't minimize. It's so important to our international competitiveness.
Great, thank you, David. And now, Beth, would you like the last word?
Always. I mean, first of all, everything that everybody has said, absolutely important, totally agree. I want to just remind you all that first of all, we do understand the magnitude of what you're going through. And I know that it's really hard to ask you to be patient, but you may not think government's moving very fast in their response to this pandemic, but they're moving at lightning speed by virtue of the way they used to move before COVID-19. So they're figuring it out as they go along. They're trying to respond as quickly as they can. And when they don't get it quite right, people like Charlotte and myself and Kevin and others are going in and showing them where they didn't quite get it right, and they're trying to react to that. So I just, I just beg you to be just a little patient. I know that's really hard when you think the roof is coming down on top of you. The other thing I just want to say is, please don't reinvent the wheel. Don't spend time trying to figure out. There are so many resources out there. That collaboration spirit, we are sharing everything. I've got members of my team that are putting all of that stuff online, links to every international set of protocols that you can come up with. We're sharing across provinces and territories within the country. So please don't reinvent the wheel. What our favorite saying these days is rob and duplicate. So do that. And then the other one is please remember that we are here for you. And if you need to, reach out and talk to us. And I think I speak on behalf of all of the panelists when I say there isn't a phone call or an email that we won't answer. We are here for you, and we've got your back, and we're stronger together, and we will see the other side of this. So I want to thank you for joining us today, and I just, as you have been with us on a weekly basis, thank you for being here. And thank you to the rest of the panelists and to TIAC and DC for putting the town hall on today. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Beth. Well, unfortunately, we have ran out of time for today. I'd like to say thank you for joining us for today's town hall and submitting your questions. For those that did not have your questions answered live, we will send them to the panel and ask that they reply to you directly. Once again, thank you to the Tourism Industry Association of Canada, Indigenous Tourism Ontario, OTAC, Destination Canada, TIO for putting on this session, and a big thank you to our participants. Before we say goodbye, with the support from the Government of Canada's Canadian Experience Fund, TIAC has launched a new program, Elevating Canadian Experiences. This is a how-to workshop series focused on tourism recovery through culinary and shoulder season development. The program has launched a series of online workshops across Canada to provide capacity building and support for tourism businesses in developing shoulder winter seasons and culinary as part of a recovery and resilience. Thank you for joining today's town hall. Thank you to all our panelists. Oh, sorry. We're going to watch a video now.
Crisis like this, Canadians have been coming together like never before. But in this global context, tourism industries have taken the brunt of the shock. Economies will recover and people will travel again, and we want you to be ready to welcome them when it's time. To get back on our feet, Canada needs to support its tourism industry, an industry with a presence from coast to coast to coast, and traditionally representing nearly 1 in 10 Canadian jobs. Canada is full of untapped potential and is usually one of the world's most visited destinations during the summer months. But with only 1% of visitor activities being winter-based, there is so much of Canada left untouched. In our workshops, you will learn to grow culinary and seasonal opportunities in your own backyard. During peak times, Ontario, Quebec, British Columbia, and Alberta account for 87% of Canada's tourism employment, with food tourism playing a crucial role, especially during times of uncertainty. We have the opportunity to work on building and strengthening Canada's tourism industry to recover jobs and resuscitate the economy. The Tourism Industry Association of Canada proudly presents the Elevating Canadian Experiences workshop program. the How-To Workshop series to recover Canadian tourism through culinary and shoulder season development.
Thank you for joining us for today's town hall. Thank you to all of our panelists and to Bonnie Ruddick for leading the discussion today. I'd also like to thank our town hall series sponsors, Meetings Means Business Canada, Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada, WestJet, and Air Canada. Take care and stay well.